think we have yet. On my computer it says the live video broadcast will begin soon. Okay, we're here now, I think. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Conle. I'm the books editor of the Evening Herald here in Dublin. And I am here with really great representation of some new Irish writing in the women's fiction genre. We've got Carmel Harrington, whose latest book is The Life You Left. We've got Clodagh Murphy, who's out with Some Girls Do. And we have Hazel Gaynor, who has recently published A Memory of Violets. Is that right, Hazel? Has that just come out now?
That's right, yeah. It was out in the States on Tuesday, and it'll be out in Ireland and the UK on Thursday, coming Thursday.
Cool, thanks very much. We've got a lot to talk about. There's loads of questions that have come in already, which is really exciting. But given the week that's in it, and given that this is the HarperCollins Romance Festival, and thanks very much to the publisher for organizing this, it's really fantastic to be able to have a chat live with people about their writing. First question I've got to ask, because we've got Valentine's Day coming up in a couple of days. What was your best and or worst Valentine's experience ever? Carmel, we'll start with you.
Best, probably, if I can have two very quick ones. One might be when I was 10 years old. I had a bumper year for Valentine's cards. I think I got about 5 from the boys in Blackwater National School. So that was a great year when I was 10. I don't think I ever did 5 in 1 year after that again. Best year, though, was probably the year that I met my husband. And that first year we dated on Valentine's Day, it was almost a year after we met, and that was very romantic. We were very loved up, so it was lovely. And worst, I had a few. In my 30s, I had a few when I was single. I had a few bad ones, kind of sitting with a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates at home while everybody else was kind of going, damn you all. But yeah, I've had lots of good ones since I met Rog, so it's all good.
That's great. Thanks, Carmel. Clodagh, how about you? Do you want to chime in on this?
I haven't had any particularly awful ones, except the usual, not getting any cards at school and that sort of thing. It's not something that's really on my radar that much. But
yeah.
My best one was probably, it sounds a bit sad, my best one recently was when I was finishing my latest book, Some Girls Do, and I borrowed a house out in Dalkeith. It was a very, very beautiful house, right on the sea, and I just stayed there for a week, and it happened to be Valentine's Day around that time. So it was just me and my gorgeous hero, and lots of chocolate and wine, and writing romantic stuff. So.
That sounds pretty idyllic to me, frankly. That sounds good. I might try to plan that myself this weekend. It sounds great. Hazel, how about you? You want to chime in here?
Yeah, I am very similar to everybody else. I'm sure we've a litany of disastrous Valentines sitting on our own with a bottle of wine and feeling very sorry for ourselves. But when I was thinking about this, I had to share my favourite Valentine's Day was when our little baby had just been born. Our first son, Max, had been born in the October, and new parents hadn't a clue what we were doing. So the following Valentine's Day, we were still trying really hard to be romantic, and we ended up just eating a Marks and Spencer's lasagna that I think was probably burnt at the kitchen table, and Max was in his little Moses basket sleeping beside us, and it was just one of those moments where you look at each other and go, how on earth did this happen? So that's a particularly memorable one. And I think my worst was when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and there was a boy at school who liked me, and he came round to the house after school, and he literally had about a dozen bars of chocolate stuffed in his arms. And I was like, oh, hi, that was nice. And my mom very politely said, that's very nice of you, but you really shouldn't have bought all of them. You must take them home to your mom. But she allowed me to keep one, but she directed me towards her favourite brand of chocolate. So she made sure she did quite well out of it herself. So I just remember him walking off down the street with all his chocolate in his arms. So that was probably a good introduction to not such a good Valentine's Day.
Hazel, I'm heartbroken for that poor fella.
I wonder if he ever got over that, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? I'm going to go right to some questions here because they are really relevant, and they were certainly what I was thinking of starting, of getting into at some stage, but it seems we may as well start with it now. And it's basically because we are all living in Ireland and have some connection to Irishness. There are a couple questions here. There's one from Sharon who says, why do you think Irish fiction has become so popular worldwide? Clodagh, do you want to start with that? What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a very strong storytelling tradition in Ireland, and the Irish like a good story, and I think that's very important. And probably the Irish sense of humour as well. There's a sort of warmth. It's not you have a sort of particular whimsical sense of humour, but there's a warmth to it as well. It's not nasty or so I think probably that.
Great, thanks. Carmel, what do you think? What makes Irish fiction so globally interesting to readers?
I think I agree totally with Clodagh. I think we're born on the shoulders of great Shanachies or Irish storytellers. I know there's lots of them in my family. I often say that I think I get my imagination from my father, who is a natural Shanachie. But also, I think the reason why it's so popular worldwide is the Irish are everywhere. So I think people know the Irish and they know what we're like. No matter where you are in the world, you'll probably bump into someone from Ireland. And we do have a natural warmth, I think. And I think we like to laugh and we like to cry. And that warmth comes across in our writing. And people understand it because they know us. So therefore, I think our writing translates no matter where in the world you are. You probably know someone Irish, so if you read Irish fiction, you kind of get the phrases and you get the dialect and you get where we're coming from. I think that helps, I really do.
Great, thanks. Hazel, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm obviously adopted Irish, originally from England, but I'm here 13 years now. My husband's Irish, and I've always loved, I always think there's such a huge literary heritage here. There's all of the greats of Irish writers, so I always feel very kind of conscious of that when I am writing my own books. You feel like you're stepping into very huge shadows, and I think I agree with Carmel and Clodagh. There's such a natural wit and warmth and honesty about the Irish, and so much heritage and culture. And I think the history, I write historical fiction, and I think there's just that incredible wealth of history here in Ireland as well. And as Carmel said, that there are Irish all over the world, and I think naturally people gravitate back to their roots and to home. So I think that's obviously helped the spread globally of Irish fiction and Irish authors, and I just think it's fabulous to be part of that heritage now. Part of that that great wealth of talent that's out there.
Great, and your new book, A Memory of Violets, features Irish characters, and it's largely set in London. Is that correct? Can you tell us about that book?
Yeah, it's set, and again, this is such amazing when you start to research some of the stories from the past. And A Memory of Violets is based around true events. It's set around the lives of two little orphaned flower sellers, two sisters, who were living in London around the flower markets in Covent Garden. But they had come over from Ireland, and this is very much based in fact. And I knew I wanted to tell the story of the street sellers of London in the Victorian era. What I hadn't appreciated when I started to research that was how many huge pockets of Irish emigrants there were living in London and in these areas called rookeries, which were very, very destitute and very harrowing, harsh places. And often you would find the elder sibling would look after the younger sibling, and these little girls became known as little mothers. And they were looking after their own little brothers and sisters because their parents had either died or had nothing to do with them. So my story of these two little orphaned Irish flower sellers, I say very much based in historical fact and stories that I found from my research from the era. And it's a story of how the little sister is separated from the older sister, and how the older sister spends her life trying to find what happened to Rosie. So hopefully a really heart-wrenching, romantic in a different way, the love between sisters. as well as a male-female romance that spans the book. So it was an absolute joy to research, and it's really exciting to have that out now this week.
Thanks, Hazel. Yeah, that sounds great. Carmel, you are dealing more in contemporary issues. Can you talk a little bit about The Life You Left? Because I think that has a different spin on the genre as well.
Yeah, I mean, with The Life You Left, I suppose I just wrote a story, and I didn't really think about a genre at all. Susan, I just kind of wrote the story, came to me, and it evolved and evolved some more. But it does actually, dip its toes a little bit in paranormal, because my heroine, Sarah Lawler, is actually psychic. And she has a guardian angel that she sees and speaks to that nobody else can. But that's not really the main part of the story. It's just one of the sidelines, if you like. The main story, there's a bit of a mystery there, but Sarah's husband, she's married for 10 years, and he just doesn't come home from work one day, and sends her a very, very an email that just simply says, "I'm not coming home and I'll be in touch soon." And she's left with a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of unpaid bills and 3 small children who want to know where daddy is. So the story I really wanted to examine, I like the idea of examining that, sometimes in life throws us some horrible things, and we have to deal with some really nasty things. And how much can a person take, and how much inner strength they have that they don't even know that they have. And that's really what Sarah's story is. I wanted to kind of show her journey from when all this horrible stuff happened, and she doesn't really think she's strong at all, and how she evolves as time goes on. And the more stuff that's thrown at her, actually, I think the stronger she gets.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of these big changes in her life, she ends up meeting all these new people who become her anchors and her strength. And I think that happens a lot in life. So certainly for me, when I write contemporary fiction, I just look at some of the things that interest me. And I think for some of us, infidelity, divorce, illness, sickness, money worries, they're all things that we all deal with on a daily basis. And I like to talk about those, and then just examine kind of what happens to these characters as they go along, and I find that quite interesting. So it is a little bit of a mix of genres, but I think in the main it is, it's still contemporary fiction is the main genre. It is. It's women's fiction, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's ultimately really all about relationships, isn't it, I think, especially in women's fiction in general. It's really about people and their lives and what happens to them, which I think is great, and I certainly can't get enough of it. Clodagh, your book, Some Girls Do, can you tell us about that a bit? It's got a great premise.
Yeah, it's a romantic comedy, and it's about Conle, who is a blogger. She writes quite a risque, very explicit sex blog, which is supposedly about her own life and her own experiences. But in reality, she's very inexperienced. She wants to be a writer, but she works in a bookshop. And she's moved home. She was living in London, but she's moved home to look after her mother, who has a heart condition and is incapacitated with arthritis. So her life is quite curtailed, and but she lives this very different sort of fantasy life to her blog. So then a publisher is interested in doing a book based on her blog. And can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, if you could speak a little bit louder, that'd be great.
So I'm going to yeah, so a publisher wants to do a book based on her blog. So he's somebody that she knows online. She's had a flirtation with him online. So when they meet up in real life, so there's sparks between them, and she wants to get together with him as well as doing the book. So,
oh, great.
So she decides she needs to get some experience, because he would expect her to be this very saucy, sexy person. So she gets help from this guy she's met, Luca. He's a poor and struggling artist.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically pays him to give her some sex lessons.
Okay.
And then their relationship develops along the way.
Great. So we've really got a great, broad range of stories here, and modes of approach and everything else, which is just whenever I hear sort of like the myths or the rumors that women's fiction is dying and no one's reading it anymore, it just strikes me as being crazy because there really is so much out there for everybody. Carmel, what's your experience as a reader? How do you find this particular category doing as a person who likes to read?
I read a lot, as you know, Susan. I would probably read. I used to read at least one book a week. Not so much now that I have kids. I don't have as much time, but I would certainly get through a book every couple of weeks. And I also I would, by the way, I'll read and I'll also listen to audiobooks. So that's how I find time. Sometimes when I'm driving, I'm listening to an audiobook, or when I'm washing up. So it gets me to, it means that I can actually keep abreast of all the books that are out there. But for me, I think it's just, it doesn't matter what your interest is. What I love is the eclectic mix. That that I can go from a Leanne Moriarty book, which is definitely women's fiction, but it has a strong lean to mystery, and then you can pick up a romantic comedy or pick up some historical fiction. There's such a broad range of books out there. And I know some people get really hung up on the whole thing of women's fiction, but titles don't really bother me. As long as somebody enjoys reading a book, I don't think it really matters, where it comes from. I think that if a story is well told and the plot is well written and the characters are well written, that's going to take my interest, whatever the genre that it's in. I don't tend to worry about genres too much, which is probably why my books end up being in about 55 different genres at once, because I don't worry about that too much when I read. I've never liked labels. I've always liked to do my own thing, and I'll probably carry on doing my own thing. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Hazel, what do you think about that? I mean, what kind of books do you like to read, and how do you feel, the types of stories that you want to tell, how do you feel that they're fitting into what people want these days?
Yeah, I completely agree with Carmel, and I think sometimes as a writer it's kind of frustrating that you feel that you have to fit into certain genres, and I think it can be quite limiting in a way sometimes, I think, as a reader as well as a writer. And I absolutely couldn't agree more. I think when I start writing anyway, I'm certainly not giving my book a label. I'm not putting it under the category of. I naturally am drawn to the past, and I'm naturally drawn to history, and therefore my novels would tend to fall under a historical fiction category. But there are very contemporary style issues written in them. I mean, I find if you have a child that you're worried about, if you have a friend who's ill, if you have a romantic attachment to somebody of the opposite sex, it doesn't really matter whether that happened in the late 1800s or yesterday. Those emotions actually don't change over time. And I think what readers want is just really engaging, gripping, relatable characters. And it doesn't matter whether they're wearing a hoop skirt and a bustle, or if they're wearing, contemporary clothing. I think what's at the heart of everything has to be story, and has to be, emotion and characters that draw you in. So I find I have readers who are male, who are female, who are teenagers, who are 90 years old, and I love that. I absolutely, because I wouldn't ever set out to write a book that would exclude any reader. And it's lovely to hear from somebody who, you might not necessarily think would pick up your book and read it, but they do, and they love it for whatever reason. So I think as a writer, I think just write the book you love, and write the book that's in you and that you feel passionate and excited about, and it will naturally find a space on the right shelf. But the brilliant thing now about ebooks and about social media and the internet is that you're not sort of limited to shelf space in terms of access, being accessible to readers. And that's what I find as a reader. I have to remind myself to be a reader as well as a writer. And I hear you, Carmel. The reading time starts slipping away with children as well. But yeah. I think you have to remember what it feels like to pick up a book and be excited about it, and to be, you can't put it down, and you can't wait to get back to it. And I think as a writer, you have to keep reminding yourself what that feels like as a reader. And I have towering, teetering piles of books to read, and that's fantastic, and I get to them as and when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. I mean, the books that I write are the ones that I want to read, basically, and the ones that I think my friends would like to read and my sister would like to read, and it just kind of goes on from there because, because I'm a reader first, as much as I'm a writer every day, I am a reader as well, and I think that makes a huge difference in sort of opening yourself up to taking your ideas from anywhere, and putting them down on the page for yourself. Katharina Hogan would like to know, how do you manage everything and find the time to write? Clodagh, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, well, it's something I struggle with all the time. And then a lot of the time I don't find the time, not as much as I'd like, because I work full time. Well, I cut down to 4 days a week, but
Mm-hmm.
as much as I can afford at the moment. So I just try and be disciplined and get down to it for the weekend and evening. But yeah, it's very hard sometimes, especially with all the distractions of the internet. I think it's very easy to lose hours on Twitter and Facebook and all those things.
Absolutely, yeah. Carmel, you do a lot of self-promotion. Do you find that cuts into your writing time appreciably, or is it just another thing to schedule?
It's another thing to schedule. I mean, it is. I think anybody who comes to this kind of game, unless you're lucky enough to become like an overnight sensation and sell 1 million copies of your debut novel, you've got to put some effort into connecting with readers and making your book visible, because it's a saturated market. There's new novels, because we have ebooks as well as books on actual bookshelves. There are so many books out there and so much choice for authors.
Mm-hmm.
So in order, I think, for us to be visible, you need people to start talking about you. So you need to be on Twitter and Facebook. What I do is I limit my Twitter and Facebook to a short little run in the morning before I start writing, and then in the evenings when the kids are in bed. And I write in the mornings, and Monday to Friday when the children are in school and play school. That's my structured time to write, and I'm very. I don't like to take phone calls during that time. I don't like to leave the house during that time. In the mornings when the kids are in school, I'm very particular about about getting down and actually getting my word count up. But I think you have to be realistic. You do have to find some time for social media.
Mm-hmm.
I do max an hour a day. I do probably half an hour in the mornings and half an hour to an hour in the evenings again.
That's sensible. That makes sense. That sounds like a good template for people. Hazel, do you find yourself, you mentioned you have children as well,
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to fit everything in. How do you manage that?
Yeah, again, similar to Carmel, and I think, the one thing I do find is I have to really carefully protect the writing time that I have. The children are now in school from 8:30 until 2 o'clock, so that's a really lovely block of time where I can get to the desk, and that's my schedule, and I have to, same if the phone rings, I know it's my sister, but I'll ignore her and I'll ring her back later, because that could easily take up, half an hour, 40 minutes, and once you're in that zone, I think you need to really protect that. The one thing I'll say about that is that sometimes I turn up at the desk at 9 o'clock in the morning and I've had an awful morning, I've had a dreadful night, you're not in the mood to write. And, I often say to people now, you can't sort of wait for that luxury of being, for your muse to arrive or whatever you want to call it. I think you learn to just put words down, and sometimes they might not be great, but you've got something to work with later. And some of my time in that morning period will be research, some of it will be the actual writing, and other days obviously will be editing. And then in the afternoons I can dip in and out and check in on social media. And actually fortunate with my publishers are in the US, so they don't really come online until about then anyway. So that's kind of, I suppose, less sit down. I can just dip in and out and be in and around for the children. So, and my weekends I try and save very much for family time. I think you need to protect that time as much as you need to protect your writing time.
Right.
It doesn't always work, it's slightly chaotic, which you would see if you walked into my house right now, but you juggle, and I'm just delighted I can do these 2 jobs, you know. So you just make it work, as anybody who works and has a family does. You just have to make it work.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Laverne Winters comments that it feels like Irish romance lends itself easily to paranormal because of the mythos out of Ireland, which I would agree with, I think. Carmel, back to you for a second. We've got another question here from, sorry, it's gone down, from Karen, who's basically wondering, since you have been dubbed the queen of emotional writing, do you think this style should warrant a new subgenre of its own?
Oh, yes, please. Yeah. Can we call it maybe the Kleenex, you know, category or something like that? You know, for my first novel, Beyond Grace's Rainbow, it is a very sad premise. It's a single mom who has cancer and she's fighting for her life. And it's a sad story, you know. And the amount of people who've read that book who told me that they sobbed buckets. The Life Left has a lot of sad moments in it too, and a lot of people have told me they've cried in that. Maybe not quite as much as in Beyond Grace's Rainbow, but they've cried. So I do think that my writing does tend to pull at the heartstrings. But I kind of write, do you know how I write? I write exactly as I live. I kind of have very much, I'm an open book. I laugh an awful lot actually. I laugh a lot, but I cry a lot too, and I think that's good, you know. So you kind of, I'm rubbish at and pants at hiding my emotions. So however I feel, you'll know it because it's all over my face. And it's the same for my writing. I kind of just write exactly what's in my heart. So there is a lot of emotion in it, there's no doubt about it. And I do think if Amazon were to put an emotional category out there, I would have been a #1 book for both my books, each with each, because that word emotion and crying and Kleenex kept coming up. And you know the way with metadata, with Amazon, you know, you go up the ranks based on reviews and comments made. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Karen, if I made you cry. Don't hate me.
I love crying. I love crying. Crying is great. It's
Susan,
so
can I just say, Susan, I promise if people read my books, I do make you laugh as well. There's a few giggles in there. It's not...
Yeah, fair enough. Now, to stay with you, Carmel, for a second, you've got a book that you're... what's your new project called? And if you could talk to us about that. I know that your fans are really looking for your next book.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, it's at the moment, the working title is The Road Back Home. But I like that title. I hope it sticks. Although, as you know, in this industry that we're in, you know, you can't get too attached to titles. The Life Test was Sleep of Dreams at one point, and I think the right title, it ended up with the right title, so the title might change. But the story, I'm very excited about it. I don't have any details to share with you yet about when it's going to be published, other than I hope later this year. But I'm really, really, really passionate about the story. It's about a family, the Guinness family, Dad Ollie, Mum May, and 2 children, Evie and Jamie. And due to a set of circumstances which I won't share, but they end up on a road trip, an epic road trip around Europe in a camper van. So it's 8 weeks in Europe in a camper van. This family of 4, teenage daughter, young boy, and Mum and Dad. So it was a lot of fun to write. I really loved writing it. And I'm very, very proud of the story, and I can't wait for people to read it. But I just don't have a date yet when it's going to happen, but hopefully later this year.
That's great. But it's there and ready to go, so that's fantastic.
Yeah. Subject to a few edits.
Of course, yeah. Clodagh, what have you got coming up? Are you working on something new right now? Or are you taking a break?
Well, I have taken a bit of a break, but I'm working on several things. I'm working on new romantic comedy, but it's in the very early stages. I'm not a planner. I don't really plan out my books very well, so I don't have a lot of idea of what's going to happen when they start. Just a basic beginning and planning at the end. But I know there's a gold digger, an investigation into a potential gold digger involved and a mysterious woman. But yeah, I don't have a lot to say about it yet.
Okay. Do you have a couple of things on the boil at one time, or do you just focus on one idea as you go along, or keep things active in your head?
Yeah, well, I used to just focus on one thing at a time, but this year I've just started writing a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So all at the same time, which I'm not sure how it's going to work out yet. But yeah,
That's great. Cool. Okay, and Hazel, how about you?
Yeah, lots going on, which is great. So obviously at the moment I'm busy promoting A Memory of Violets, and you know, that's so fab. But just I love that phase where you finally. I originally wrote this book in 2012 and actually had scribbled ideas for it years before that. So to have come all this way and now actually see it out there on the shelf in readers' hands is just, it's brilliant. So I'm really excited to be launching that book, and I'm already writing the next one. So book 3 is underway, well underway, she says, panicking about her May deadline. But that's due to be published in 2016. It's another historical, slightly lighter. I was just laughing at Carmel there because my 2 books have also reduced people to floods of tears. I've had people on the Titanic, and now I have little orphaned flower sellers. So I think I need to lighten things up maybe a little bit next time. So that book is a work in progress for publication 2016. So I'm moving into the 1920s with that one, which I'm really loving researching. You know, all the flappers and the Roaring Twenties, and it's just a fabulous era to be in. But there will be a real love story at the heart of that one as well. And I'm really excited as well to be working with a group of authors, one of whom is an Irish writer, Kate Kerrigan, who I love, and 8 other authors who are based in the US. And we're working together on an anthology set around the Armistice Day of the Great War, so November 1918. And we're all writing a short novella, which will be, they're not connected, the stories, but they will all be centered around the events of Armistice Day, and that's due for publication in 2016 as well. So obviously we're in that kind of centenary era of the Great War, so really excited to be writing something in that era as well. So 2 projects that I'm working on at the moment, so busy, which is great.
Fantastic. That sounds like an excellent project. I'm really looking forward to that. That sounds terrific. Pamela wants to know if any of you write about, well, real people and just disguise them so well they'll never recognize themselves. Clodagh? Gotten back at anybody in print?
My automatic reaction is no, but that's probably not true, actually. You do base, I mean, you base people on people in real life, obviously, but not in the sort of exact way that people imagine. You know, people think, oh, that's me, you know, it's not. But you take characteristics from people, including, yes, people you hate, and turn them into characters, but they're not like a blueprint of that person.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Carmel, how about you? Anything you can admit to live on the internet?
Yeah. Probably not. I did call somebody that I didn't particularly like. I didn't name them in one of my books. I gave them a small part. I'm not a very nice person. I'm not going to say which or who or what. Which was just a very small thing to do. But no, all of mine are purely from my imagination. Although, do you know what? I do get a lot of people who send me emails or contact me on Facebook or whatever and say, oh my God, I felt like I was reading about my own life. And it's like, oh my God, you know, I find it kind of a bit worrying because the stuff that I throw into my stories, the heroines tend to go through a lot of hardship before they get their happy ever after, or sometimes they don't. But no, it's all fiction, I can promise you, based on nobody and based on everybody, Susan, you know, because I am influenced by everybody I know, everybody I've met. I'm influenced by what I see in the newspapers, on TV, on the news. That all influences me, but my stories are complete fiction. They are from my imagination.
Cool. Okay, I have a question that I thought up yesterday or earlier today, and I'm dying to ask everyone. It's another Valentine's Day kind of themed thing. Dream A-list celebrity Valentine's date, past or present. Hazel.
I knew you were going to ask me first. Well, without any hesitation, I'd have to say Mr. Bradley Cooper.
Ah.
Although my husband can't hear me, so this is all fine. He's downstairs. But there's something about him. And actually, I saw him on Broadway as the Elephant Man.
Oh, wow.
It was an amazing, amazing performance. And even though I thought he was going to be in all the prosthetics and that you wouldn't actually see the delight of Bradley Cooper on the stage, but he had no prosthetics on at all. It was just him. Not wearing much, actually, at the start, which was quite interesting. But he was just... I mean, I've seen him in movies, and, you know, The Hangover and Silver Linings Playbook with Jennifer Lawrence, just amazing. Love him. And just to see him on the stage, so up close and personal and in a completely different role, I just fell in love a little bit more. So, yeah, I'd have to bag him. And as soon as I went first, nobody else can have him now.
Yeah, there you called him. Yeah, you got in there first. I have to say, not to insult your, pretend Valentine's Day boyfriend, I wasn't sure that he'd be able for that kind of acting, for that level of acting, but it sounds like he really is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. When I saw him cast in it, and it just happened to coincide that I was over in New York, and this show was just having previews, and I got myself a ticket, and it was just incredible. I didn't expect him to be, that kind of actor to carry that off on stage, such a serious part. But it was brilliant, and I think it's coming to the West End. So if anyone's interested, go and see it because he's fabulous.
Oh, great! Excellent. Thanks for that, Clodagh. Dream A-list celebrity Valentine's date.
I have to pick one. I think I would say Aidan Turner. He is who I actually based my hero Luca on in Some Girls Do.
All right.
Not personal, I don't know him. So I could, I could take him out and persuade him to star in the movie of my book.
Fantastic. Carmel?
Very easy for me to answer this because I am currently obsessed, and I mean obsessed of a ridiculous nature, with the Sons of Anarchy. I've just started watching it on Netflix about a month. Yeah, and I'm flying through the series like at a ridiculous level. So they're quite delicious. Charlie Hunnam, is that how you pronounce it? Hunnam, who's the lead character in Sons of Anarchy. I absolutely adore him. Gorgeous. Nothing at all to do with his beautiful back and beautiful bum. All to do with he's just wonderful. He's a great actor, and how he rides those motorbikes. It's just fantastic. But no, I love him. I love his character. I love the fact he's a bad boy, but with a great big heart. And I love that.
Yeah. So would that be your favorite sort of fictional guy to write or to read or to watch a movie about? I'm curious about, like, my favorite fictional guys are the kind of nerdy ones that turn out to be sort of manly at the end. I like those.
Like who?
Gosh, I can't think of one. Well, I just wrote one myself, so maybe that's what I'm thinking about. So, a sort of comic book nerd who's the de facto super in the apartment building in which the action takes place, and he just eventually reveals himself to be pretty hunky, much to the heroine's surprise. So I kind of like those revelation-y kind of things.
And is that the book you're working on at the moment, Susan?
It is, yeah. It's called Losing the Plot. It's set in Manhattan, but there's an Irish interest. So what happens is it's a romance author whose book is due in 2 weeks, and she's got nothing. She's this close to deciding to just, lower the boom and drop the whole project, and her lead heroine, who is Irish, comes to life to make sure that she gets published.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I'm pitching it currently, so fingers crossed. But
sounds great.
So thanks. Yeah, there's the nerdy hero, and then there's I have to say I'm doing a piss take on the alpha male because I think they're a bit overdone. So there's an absolutely like the alphaist of alpha males who is sort of the bad guy. So I think it's fun. It's a romantic comedy. And contemporary. So.
I love the idea of a nerdy hero. Have you given him a name yet?
Yeah, it's his name's Howard.
You see, everyone called Howard's now going to be a nerdy hero.
Great name.
Yeah, yeah. I love making up names.
Yeah.
Do you guys love making up names? I think it's my favorite part.
It can be pretty
I
hard.
do. I love making up names. Yeah, it's fun, and I think it's funny when you were talking about using real people. And I heard a lovely term sometime last year about Easter eggs, and somebody was saying, "Do you hide Easter eggs in your books?" And I was saying, "What's that?" And I do, but I didn't realise they were called Easter eggs. And it's where you have little maybe references to something that just means something to you or to your family, and you squirrel away these little things. You see, we're all know they were called Easter eggs, and I use names as Easter eggs. So I have a few quirky family names. One of the characters in A Memory of Violets is called Queenie, and that's named after my great aunt Queenie. And you know, I love doing all of that. And Florrie as well, my character Florrie, that was named after my another great aunt who was actually called Gert, but nobody ever called her Gert. They called her Florrie. I have no idea why.
Wow.
But those were fun to kind of use, you know, and kind of mishmash and a mashup of names and use those Easter eggs. So there you all know about Easter eggs now.
Thanks for that, Hazel. I'd never heard that before. That's great. Clodagh, had you heard that before?
Sorry?
Had you heard about the Easter eggs before?
No, I hadn't heard of that before, but I'm sure I've done them.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I have too. I'm going to have to go back through all my stuff and check it out. Carmel, have you done that? Had you heard of that before?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the phrase, but I've done it. I've 100% done it. In Beyond Grace's Rainbow, one of the characters is a guy called Tom, and he uses pseudonyms sometimes when he's out doing a bit. He's a guard, and if he's undercover, he uses pseudonyms. And the pseudonym he uses is my dad's name, Michael O'Grady. And I put that. Yeah, I just thought it would be kind of fun that my dad. Like he's read Beyond Grace's Rainbow, and he doesn't read fiction at all. He just wouldn't be that. He just wouldn't read fiction. But of course, he read my book, and I just love the idea of him getting to that bit around the middle and then seeing this character referring to himself as Michael O'Grady, and that was kind of fun. But the other thing that will be an Easter egg in my books, it's in both of my books and also in my third book, and I think I'm going to do it in all of them. I'm a bit of a nut for The Wizard of Oz. It's my favourite childhood movie, and so in Beyond Grace's Rainbow and also in The Life You Left, there's references, a small reference to The Wizard of Oz, and I threw one into The Road Back Home, so I think I might do that in every book. There you go. There's an exclusive for everyone, an Easter egg I do is Wizard of Oz.
That's great. Wow, that's fantastic. Do you ever feel like you want to try to write something different, maybe a screenplay or a play, or have you done? Hazel, do you have ambitions to doing other kinds of writing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think that's it. Once you get into this, and there's so many different things you can write, and I did actually have a stab at a treatment. It was neither of my novels, but I pitched at the Galway Film Flower last year. So I had an idea for a book. I'd never worked into a book. So I did I think it was a 15, 16-page treatment, and had to teach myself all about doing a treatment for a screenplay. So it was great fun. And, you know, sometimes I think it's good to challenge yourself and step out of your comfort zone and see what happens. And you might have an idea that wouldn't necessarily translate very well into a novel, but it might be brilliant as a play or as a short story. And I've certainly got plans to write children's books. You know, I've had a plan to do that for years and years and years. So hopefully that will become, you know, something in the next couple of years as well. But yeah, I think it's just exciting to try something else and see what happens. You know, I love that. Who wouldn't want to write a film, for goodness sake, you know?
That sounds great. Yeah, Clodagh, how about you?
Yeah, same. Totally agree. Recently, an idea came into my head, but it came into my head as a film. You know, I didn't feel like it was a novel, but I had no idea how to write a screenplay. So anyway, recently I did a screenwriting course, and I'm starting to work on that again now as a screenplay.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so yeah, it's very exciting, and yeah, like Hazel, you know, it's really nice to try new things and new genres. I'm writing on a couple of things as well that aren't romantic comedy, that are less commercial fiction.
Carmel, how about you?
Well, I do dabble in playwriting. I've had a play on stage, and it was probably one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. Going into a theatre and seeing people, speak words that I've written. It was just really wonderful. It really, really was, and I loved watching. I went to see it a few times, and the first time I was obviously watching the actual play, but the next time I kind of wanted to watch people's reactions to the play, and I was people watching as opposed to watching the play, and it was really cool watching people react to certain scenes that were written to make you laugh or make you cry, and I love that. So I'd like to do another play in 2015. Like Hazel, actually, I'm determined to write a children's book. I've started it. I'd love to write something that my children could read before they're adults. And last but not least, I am also very keen in doing screenplays. So yeah, I think that would be something I'd love to do. I just like to write, Susan.
Yeah.
I'm happy once I don't mind in what discipline. I'm happy to try them all.
Yeah, because I do agree that there's different rhythms that you get into, and some days you just don't feel like, I don't know, sitting down with like the big project. I mean, it's easy for me because I can get my little hits of bits and pieces of writing because I blog quite a lot, and because of the journalism that I do. Word counts are great. They are absolutely my friend. I love them. So when I am approaching a bigger project, sometimes it feels like, oh God, I don't know if I have the headspace for this, but I can still kind of get my writing juju going if, no matter what. So, and I just wonder about the screenplay stuff, Clodagh. Do you find it's a different part of your brain that you have to use, or a different sort of pacing thing that you have to do when you're approaching that way of writing?
Yeah, it is quite different. Well, it's mainly really the technical aspects that are different. But I mean, I'm just starting out, so I'm just feeling my way around at the moment. But I love writing dialogue, and my books always have a lot of dialogue in them. So in that sense, obviously screenplays are nearly all dialogue. So that part I find quite easy.
Yeah, how do people feel about dialogue? Hazel, how do you feel about that?
I love writing dialogue, actually. Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to get right. And I certainly think I'm still learning. That I'm working on my third novel now, and I'd like to think I'm improving. You'd hope you're improving with each one, and understanding how your characters spark off each other. And actually, when I write, I write very visually, so I always see this as scene. I don't know if everybody does this, but it's like I am watching my characters and wherever they are and whatever's happening, and I see it very much like I'm watching it on the big screen. And I even find myself kind of pulling the face that they're pulling. If they're excited or if they're grasping something, I'll physically sit here and do that and look at what that looks like when somebody's doing that. But I love the way that dialogue helps you with pacing. It can really bring the character home where they are in their head. And I actually love, as well as dialogue, I love expressing my characters from the first person point of view. So actually in my first book, The Girl Who Came Home, and in A Memory of Violets, I've used the device, if you like, of letters and journals, because the stories are essentially written from a third person point of view, but I love stepping into the person's head, and I love hearing them speak to me on the page. So through letters and journal entries, we get to hear their voice, which is lovely. I think as a reader, it's nice to jump in and out of that. But yeah, I think dialogue's it's a difficult thing to get right, and I think you just have to really know your character to understand how they would speak, and especially from a historical point of view as well. I have to be sort of mindful of how people would have expressed themselves in the era that I'm writing in, and without being too heavy-handed and going back to the ye olde tea shoppy on the corner. You don't want any of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So kind of keep it contemporary, but obviously with the authenticity in there as well.
Okay. We've just had a question from Susie, who wants to know, I think, Carmel and Hazel, you have experience with self-publishing. Is that correct? Carmel, did you self-publish your first book, or is that not true?
No, it's true. Actually, Beyond Grace's Rainbow was initially self-published, and then it was bought by HarperCollins. So it was out for almost a year as a self-published book, ebook only. I didn't self-publish in paperback format. I just did it through ebook.
Okay.
Basically, my budget was kind of zero, and there was very little risk for me then by doing it as an ebook. I didn't have to have 1,000 copies of the book under the stairs that nobody bought. So it was literally, and it was kind of quick. Thankfully, people did buy it, and it did quite well, and I ended up getting a book deal as a result. But I think the question was about how different was the experience when we self-published the next time.
Or how was publishing your second book different? How did that go?
Well, it did feel very different the second time, even when Beyond Grace's Rainbow, because it was republished by HarperCollins. So it felt very different. It really kind of got a second bite of the apple, really. It got a new cover. It also got a professional edit, because I had done it all myself the first time around, and it benefited from that. Although they didn't change the story at all. If anything, they added a chapter they asked me to add a chapter as opposed to taking anything away. But it did feel very, very different the second time around, because I suppose I had a bigger audience then as a result of being with HarperCollins, and reaching a greater number of people. I also found that when I self-published, it was difficult to get book bloggers and reviewers in the media, to take a look at my book. And so then when you had a publisher, you started to get more media attention, which you need in order to sell books and for people to buy. So it was a very different experience second time round, and again then with The Life You Left. To say I was as nervous each time. It doesn't get any easier. It's nerve-wracking as an author to share your work, and I know I'll be terrified and I won't sleep for a week before the next book comes out. It is nerve-wracking, putting yourself out there and hoping people like your work. But it was a little bit easier, I think, with a publisher, in the sense that things happened that little bit quicker for me. I don't know if that answers or not. Is that okay?
No. I do, yeah, because it would be. I mean, the whole writing experience, which I do quite like, just being by myself, in a room with the computer and all the crazy people in my head, or I'm the crazy person with all the people in their head. But sometimes it can be really isolating, and the notion of taking it even further into that activity by self-publishing, because it's nice to have an editor, it's nice to have somebody else looking at it, it's great to have someone who's designing your book cover, but sometimes you just have to do it yourself. And Hazel, I think you made that decision as well, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very similar to Carmel, and just took the decision. My book, The Girl Who Came Home, had been rejected by traditional routes, and I was very keen to try and put it out there, and I had the centenary of Titanic coming up. It was a novel set around the Titanic. It was a no-brainer, really, but I was terrified, knew very little about what I was really getting into, and you just hope for the best, and similar to Carmel, the book thankfully did really well, and a year later was picked up as part of a 2-book deal with A Memory of Violets, as it's now called, with HarperCollins, and again, similarly, they republished The Girl Who Came Home. So, I think I always wanted to work with a publisher. I wanted to see what that felt like, to be with the professionals, that this was something I couldn't achieve on my own. You can't reach out to the same booksellers, to the bloggers, and everything that comes with I think the comfort of having a team around you, having a professional editor, having a designer for the cover, having a marketing team. It's really, really hard to do all that on your own, and it is a very isolating job. So I think for me, I think it gave me the confidence to push myself a little bit further. And you just feel that you're surrounded by a team of people, and you're actually all rooting for this book together. You all celebrate on publication day. Whereas when I first self-published The Girl Who Came Home, I often say this, it literally was, I pressed publish and I literally went outside to hang the washing on the line, and it's like, this isn't how it should be. So I think just having that sense of being part of a bigger picture, to me really, really helped with my confidence as a writer, which has been great then to come to the second book, and to have readers waiting for a second book is just lovely. It's just been a really lovely experience this time around.
That's great. And just to finish on this, because we're almost out of time, Clodagh, what kind of advice would you have gotten maybe in the beginning of your career, or what advice would you pass on to somebody who wants to write more than they want to do anything else?
My main advice would be to write a book you would love to read. Write what you're passionate about. Don't pay attention to, don't get caught up in thinking about the market or what's trendy at the moment or what other writers are doing. Just write something you would love to read, and hopefully other people will too.
Great, thanks. Carmel?
My advice to any writers, I would certainly say, first of all, read. I really agree. I know Stephen King has famously said this, but if you don't read, you can't write. So I really think anyone who says, oh, I don't have time to read, I think find the time. You don't have to read a book a day or anything, but find the time to read, because that will help you understand what you like. It will help you understand what you don't like. It will also teach you and inspire you. So I think read. And as well, and then find the time to write. And again, I was a devil for this. I was forever putting off writing, saying for years I was too busy, my job was too busy, life was too busy, everything was too busy. But like now, right, I'm married and I have 2 small children who take up a lot of time, but I still find the time to write a book. And on average, I'm doing a book and a half a year. So I'm busier than I ever was, but I'm writing, and that's because now I'm actually prioritizing time to write, and I think that's really important. So if you're that person, if you're watching this right now, okay, and you're saying to yourself, and you've been saying for years, you want to write a novel, but you don't have the time, stop making that as an excuse. Find the time. Get up half an hour earlier, go to bed half an hour later, but find the time, and you won't regret it. Best thing I ever did, Susan, when I started to write, I'm having the time of my life. I'm so sorry I didn't start when I was 10 years ago, but I'm glad I started. At least I did start eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Hazel, how about you?
Oh, absolutely. All of what everybody else has said, and that whole thing about finding time. Just make time. If you really want to, I think you can always stop watching the TV, or you can get up a little bit earlier or go to bed a bit later. I think you'll find the time. But I would also say finish the book. I think even if the book you're writing isn't the book that ultimately gets you to where you want to be, I think it's so important to finish it out, prove to yourself that you can sit down, stick with it, even when the road gets bumpy and you think it's the worst idea you've ever had. You always go through that. I'm going through it right now, and you just have to keep going and finish it right at the end. Such an achievement. And do that each time until you get where you want to be, and just persevere. I honestly couldn't say that more. It's never too late to try. It's never too late to see what's out there for you, and just persevere. Just self-belief and keep going.
That's great. I think we're going to end on that note. I'd like to thank Carmel and Clodagh and Hazel for participating. I think it was a great chat. There was loads there that I think readers will really have loved to have heard, and I hope you saw loads and loads of books from everybody who was listening. And I'd also like to thank HarperCollins and Kate and Charlotte for organizing this and getting us online. So thanks very much, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, just before you go, Susan, can we just thank you, Susan? You've been an amazing moderator and hosting this for us. So just a huge thank you for taking time out. I mean, everybody in Ireland will know Susan because she's the books editor of the Evening Herald, but she's also a wonderful writer herself. So thank you so much for keeping us all online. Really appreciate your time, Susan.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'll do it anytime you ask me. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Okay.